All right, so happy to be joined today by my good friend Dan Rafael over at what, Dan? Big Fight Weekend, your own Substack operation. What else are you working on?
Well, Fight Freaks Unite's my newsletter that I hope everybody subscribe to and get the alerts in their email. And also been doing some business with Big Fight Weekend, a good website with all of your box needs as well, and doing my thing. And looking forward to traveling next week for Valdez and Stevenson, and staying out in Vegas for the week for the Canelo Bivol fight. Plenty of stuff going on. We got a lot of big fights with we'll talk about with Fury and Dillian Whyte this weekend. Just had the big fight last weekend with Errol Spence and the big win over Dennis Ugas, and it's a great schedule coming up.
Yeah, absolutely. Let's cut right to the chase, Dan. I know we've got a conference call coming up with Canelo Alvarez in a few minutes. So, look, big news, as you said, 94,000 people will be attending the Saturday fight in London at Wembley Stadium between heavyweight champion, WBC heavyweight champion Tyson Fury and the longtime #1 contender Dillian Whyte. Who do you like in this fight and why? I looked at the odds real quick. Fury is basically a minus 650 favorite, and the over-under for rounds is 9.5. What's your thoughts on both of those numbers?
The rounds, I think and I'm not a betting man, you know me a long time, I don't really bet on fights. I don't think, as a person that's covering the fights, that it's really very appropriate to be wagering on them. So I don't bet on fights, but I like the under in that. And in that I like Fury, not maybe dramatically less than 9, but in that ballpark. That's why the over-under, it's, you got to decide. It's awfully close, but I do think if I had a bet on it, I would go with the under. I saw when I've always thought Fury would win this fight. I have ample respect for Dillian Whyte. He's been a hell of a contender for a long time, but I feel like Fury's overall skills and versatility and size and all the things that he can do, that he's just at a little bit of a better level, and that's the way compared to pretty much all of the heavyweights in boxing at the present moment. But what I actually found myself thinking about when I watched him do his workout yesterday and saw some of his interviews, he looks in unbelievably good condition compared to the way you typically will see Tyson Fury. Not to say he's out of shape, but he's never been a buff, muscular guy or anything like that. He hasn't needed to be. Larry Holmes wasn't. Plenty of great fighters haven't been. But Fury looked, in my opinion, in particularly good shape for this fight. And that's going to be a problem. I mean, I haven't really gotten a chance to see Dillian Whyte because he didn't show up at the workout. A lot of people thought there was, he was playing games again like he did early in the promotion. My understanding from talking to folks there who were involved with the event, they weren't even really that upset because they believe that there actually were some travel issues that prevented him from getting there in time. So there was really no, there was nothing. They weren't disappointed, as boxing people. If they thought he was playing games, they'd have MF'd him all over the place. But they didn't do that. They thought it was legit, and they were like cool with it. So I didn't get a chance to see him work out. But look, Tyson Fury looks in great shape. He seems in a good frame of mind. He's excited to be fighting in front of a huge crowd at home. He hasn't been in a fight in the UK in a number of years. His last several fights, all three Deontay Wilder fights, plus the Otto Whalen fight, the Tom Schwartz fight, they were all in the United States. So he's like the returning of the conquering hero going home, where Dillian Whyte has fought, primarily almost all of his fights in the UK. A couple other places. He fought in America once a few years ago. But, it's a huge event. I'm looking forward to watching the fight. I mean, it's just a good old-fashioned, solid heavyweight matchup for the title.
Yeah, absolutely. I think what you said about him being in such good shape, I mean, I think that's the thing that resonates so much as we head into this fight, because look at what he did against Deontay Wilder when he was still sort of like getting into shape, and in that first fight, even the second fight. And then to be able to think that he has this fitness on top of that boxing skill. And Sugar Hill Stewart, his trainer today, talked about the mental capacity. That's the thing that they've been working on so much, is just outsmarting the opponent. You've got to think that, I don't know. I mean, I believe this. I believe that Deontay Wilder is a more effective fighter than Dillian Whyte. Agree or disagree?
I don't know if I would use the term effective. I mean, they both bring different things to the table. I mean, I think Dillian Whyte is a better technician because Deontay, for as good as he has been, he's really been a one-trick guy. I mean, just that massive right hand. I mean, I think back to the rematch with Luis Ortiz. The only thing he was looking for is to land a right hand. He never landed anything, and it was just a matter of time. Are the 12 rounds going to run out, or is he going to land a right hand? And he landed literally a single right hand that put him out. Dillian, and that's, if you're going to have one weapon, that's a good one to have if you're going to be a heavyweight champion. So, all respect to Deontay Wilder. He used that right hand to great effect for a long time and had a lot of knockouts and a lot of title defenses. But in terms of the overall package, the movement, the jab, probably the chin, those things I would have to probably put in Dillian Whyte's favor. He's not as tall as Deontay Wilder, which was, for Fury, sort of a different look because he's so much taller than all of his opponents for the first time, maybe in a long time, maybe since he fought Klitschko. He was looking at a man that was only very slightly shorter than him as opposed to a lot shorter than him. Dillian Whyte's a very competent heavyweight. He's got a tremendous resume, but he's been in a lot of battles, a lot of wars. I know Fury's been in some tough fights with Wilder, but I feel like Whyte has definitely taken a lot more punishment than Tyson Fury has over the years. And we'll see if that manifests in the fight on Saturday. Look, he did get knocked out, but with one shot against Alexander Povetkin, got the revenge in the next fight that retired Povetkin. And when people talk about how long Dillian Whyte's been sitting around as number one contender, they kind of forget, like, by the way, he got put to sleep in one fight. Yeah. Yes, granted, he's come back and won, and good for him on that, and he deserves this title opportunity. But, he's a beatable guy.
And he does have some one-punch power himself, Dillian Whyte. All right, we saw that against Povetkin.
Yeah. No, Dillian Whyte's a good puncher also. I mean, he's not in the level, in my opinion, of a Deontay Wilder, but Deontay Wilder, in my estimation, is one of the top handful of punchers in the history of the sport. So that's you're comparing him to one of the all-time great punchers. But Dillian Whyte is a good puncher, no doubt about it. We've seen him in a lot of fights, seen him score a lot of knockouts against some good quality opponents.
As Tyson Fury reaches this moment, as we've said, 94,000 at Wembley Stadium, the biggest sporting event in the history of Europe, Frank Warren said today at the news conference. He's making these comments that he seems very intent and serious about this being his final fight. Do you believe him?
What I believe is that when he said it, he believes himself. So I don't think most fighters, when they talk about retirement, are just thinking in their mind, I'm going to be back in 6 months, but I'm just going to tell everybody I'm retiring just to make this a bigger event. I don't think that they're wired that way. I think that Tyson Fury and any number of boxers that we've heard say that sort of talk about I'm retiring before the fight, and then ultimately don't retire, I don't think they're just lying to us. I think that they believe that they're retiring, and that's their prerogative. And at some point after the fight, they start to think about it, reassess, and decide they still feel good. They still have the itch to get back in the gym. They have opportunities to have good fights, good paydays. So I'll take Tyson Fury at his word that when he says those words, and he said it repeatedly this week, and including in one video interview he did on behalf of Top Rank for their website, for their YouTube, that he does believe that this is the end of the line. Now, whether or not, if he beats him on Saturday, or even if he doesn't beat him, that 3 or 4 months from now he's not going to decide, hey, you know what, I'm going back to the gym, and what am I thinking? I'm definitely going to fight again. There's only so many times you can wash the car and mow the lawn. He's not an old man. And when I say that, and he did go on and on and on about this is the last ride. Every dog has its day, as Julius Caesar said, there's always somebody else to fight. But what I always think about whenever I hear about a boxer, especially somebody as accomplished as Tyson Fury, I remember when Bernard Hopkins retired. And I was looking for something to write one day, and I was like, you know what, I'm going to give Bernard a call. This is like 3-4 months after he retired. Might not have even been that long. It might have been 2 months after he retired. I think this is after he fought Antonio Tarver.
Okay.
And that he was retiring. So I had a good relationship with Bernard. I called him up one day and I said, hey, Bernard, you know what? I figured it's a slow day. I was joking about it. It's a slow day. I was gonna call just see how things are going in retirement, what's going on, and how are you enjoying, life. And Bernard Hopkins started telling me about how he's taking his daughter to school every day. He's been mowing the lawn. He's been washing the car. How he's gone through the box of clippings from his career, of newspaper clippings and magazine articles and photos that his wife had kept for many years. And he was sorting through them and the scrapbooks that she had made and all that. And when I heard him talk about washing the car and cleaning out the garage, and I knew Bernardo really well for a long time, I'm like, and I didn't say this to him, but in my mind, I hung up the phone and I said, there's no question in my mind he is going to fight, and it's going to be soon. He's not going to stay out for like 2 years or whatever. And sure enough, Bernard Hopkins came back and reached great heights after that retirement and ended up winning, a number of big fights and other titles and such. And so while Tyson Fury may think that, and he'll enjoy himself taking his kids to school and As he said, I'm going to go out to, I'm going to stay to myself. Maybe we'll go out for a dinner on Saturday night. But when he does that a couple of times and he washes the car and he mows the grass and whatever, as he always says, he's a fighting man, and you don't just put that to rest, the next day. He's not an old man. He's not a shot fighter. He still has a lot of quality left. So maybe he's not going to be around for a lot longer, but again, take him at his word. But when it's all said and done, I have to believe, just based on the past history of this sport, that we will see Tyson Fury back in the ring, because win or lose, Lance, there's going to be some enormous fights out there for him and some giant paydays.
I mean, and the thing is, he truly has not tasted what it's going to be like to walk into the arena with 94,000 people cheering his name, and to know that he's got at least 2 other fights, out there for him with Anthony Joshua and/or Usyk, that could take place in the same type of facility. I mean, this is going to be, whether he said he is right about the Julius Caesar quote, but look, I mean, those fights are legitimate and they're right in his face. I mean, that's going to be very, very difficult to walk away, whether he's, like he said, I don't need the money and you guys know that, or not. I mean, there is so much money on the table, you can't not walk away from that.
Listen, when you're that good at what you do, and I mean, look, there's always a risk. I mean, you always talk about, like, walk away one fight too soon, then one fight too late and all that. Yeah. But I don't think that Tyson Fury is even close to the point where he's like, I haven't seen any degradation in his skills or his abilities. He seems like
he's right.
He hasn't taken punishment. He's in his early 30s. He hasn't taken huge punishment. I know he hasn't had the easiest life in terms of the way he's lived it, but he's cleaned himself up in terms of the drug use and the alcohol problems that put him on the shelf for a few years. But when you're fighting at that high of a level, the opportunities are going to be there. Gargantuan paydays are going to be there. I don't know anybody that turns down, the 8-figure paydays, potentially in the biggest fights possible, maybe even a 9-figure payday, that they're going to walk away to clean the garage. I just, when all you've done is box, and it's not like he dislikes it. He always talks about how the only place he's happy is when he's boxing and training. So the 2 comments about walking away and the enjoyment that he gets, they're incongruous to me, which is why I believe that, again, he may say it and he may believe it, and I'm not calling him a liar, but when he has to think about it and deal with it for real, probably he'll be back. Of course, you got to see what happens on Saturday. That's obviously going to have a big bearing on what the future holds for him. The main thing is, let's have a good fight Saturday night.
Yeah, now it's this the other cloud kind of like looming over this fight, Dan, and it is that Tyson Fury's connection to the alleged drug cartel leader Daniel Kinahan that surfaced in last week's announcement, basically a bounty placed on Kinahan by the U.S. Treasury Department, $5 million for any information that leads to his arrest / conviction. Tyson Fury, gave Daniel Kinahan a lot of credit for negotiating in 2020 the fight with Anthony Joshua that fell apart when Fury had to fight Deontay Wilder, and then obviously Joshua goes on to lose to Usyk, so he's got to deal with that fight. So that is on hiatus. But does Tyson Fury need to, and he hasn't done this yet, does Tyson Fury need to follow the lead of someone we know in the business, Bob Yalen, who stepped away yesterday as CEO of MTK Global? Does he need to announce a clean split? I mean, I know he made some comments on Sky Sports that he doesn't have anything more to do with Daniel Kinahan, but what's your thoughts on this connection and how it maybe stains Tyson Fury?
I mean, you'd like to see him make a clean break and disavow him completely. I think he went about as far as he was going to go, which is say, I'm not doing business with him. What another man does is not my business, etc. He did, in that interview you mentioned with Sky Sports, draw a bizarre comparison to, him speaking about his thoughts about Ukraine. It's not my business, when he's not involved in the conflict, the war that's happening between Russia and Ukraine, but he has had direct business dealings with Kinahan, who he has referred to as his advisor, friend, whatever, let him negotiate or had him negotiate on his behalf, what would have been a mega fight. Claims there hasn't been any business since 2020. I mean, I thought he handled it okay. I mean, could it have been better, I suppose. I sort of didn't really, at one point in one of the interviews, I don't remember if it was the Sky Sports interview or the interview that he did with a group of writers and video guys, where he said, look, I'm just a dumb boxer that gets hit in the face. I mean, don't condescend about that. You did business with this man. whether you knew what his background was or not. Just be honest about it. If you know, I don't think he did anything wrong, Fury, like that. He wasn't part of Kinahan's, cartel, if you will. Just say what it is and move on. I mean, but you don't hiding it and being flip about it in a serious situation is probably not their greatest look. But he's also a couple of days before a big fight, so I understand from the mental perspective, he's not thinking about that stuff. He doesn't want to hear about anything other than, I'm getting in the ring to defend the heavyweight championship against a guy looking to take my head off. So from that point of view, I respect that he didn't really want to get into it too much. Maybe after the fight's over and things calm down, he'll address it more fully. The reality is, though, I'm not sure what there is left to address. Clearly, he's not going to be working with the guy anymore. MTK, which Kinahan owned and then sold, but people thought he was still behind, they announced on Wednesday that they will cease operations by the end of the month. So the fall from grace, has been ever since the U.S. Treasury Department put the sanctions out on Kinahan against him and other associates and some businesses. Everybody in boxing has stopped doing business with MTK, so they can't really carry on. So the reality is, it was literally like about the sanctions were Monday of last week, and here we are as we tape this on Wednesday of this week. So it's been barely a week, and you had every company in boxing essentially stopped doing business with them. You had the CEO of the company, Bobby Ellen, resign, and then the company, less than 24 hours announced that they will cease operations in less than a month. For a company that had a lot of power and hundreds of fighters under contract, that's a pretty steep and quick fall from grace.
Yeah, absolutely. Any idea? I know that when I spoke to Bob Arum when this news first broke, he basically indicated to me that he expected, the likes of Josh Taylor and Michael Conlon to ultimately, be separating from MTK and be separating from any kind of allegiance to Daniel Kinahan. It seems as if that will now, be clinched by this news. What becomes of those guys as far as what you're expecting or hearing?
Well, I mean, the fact is that those fighters, people have to understand that in the United States, you can't be a manager and a promoter. It's against the Muhammad Ali Act, a federal law that requires that firewall between the manager, which has the fiduciary duty to the boxer, and the promoter that does not. In Europe, it's not like that. The promoter and the manager can be one and the same. So there are outfits like Frank Warren, for example, who is co-promoter of Tyson Fury. He doesn't manage Tyson Fury, but there are boxers that box for Queensberry Promotions who Frank also manages. And MTK was in a situation because they were a European-based company, Dubai actually, but did a lot of their shows in the UK, that they were a promoter and a manager. So in the case of the fighters you just mentioned, like take a Josh Taylor, for example. Josh Taylor's promoter is Top Rank. His management was MTK. So he'll still continue to be promoted by Top Rank, and then it'll be up to Josh to decide which way he wants to go in terms of getting another representation, another representative to manage his career, to do to negotiate his business. And it will be the same with those other boxers. Now, the ones that are, in some ways, it was obviously a necessity that they were going to have to close up. It will have a detrimental effect, I believe, on some of the fighters that they managed and promoted, that kept them active, that put them on shows regularly, that were paying their purses. And a lot of the fighters that they had, one thing that was interesting about NTK, and this was just my personal viewpoint, they had a lot of fighters under, like multiple hundreds of fighters under contract. But the guys at the highest level, the Tyson Furies, the Josh Taylor, fighters at that level, the Billy Joe Saunders, a Conlon, people that were either champions or top contenders or superstar type prospects, it was a very small percentage of the fighters that they were working with. A lot of them were European level guys that might sell tickets in a certain location, or, were fledgling fighters, but maybe didn't have a pathway to greatness, let's say, or to be an elite top champion. Those are the fighters that's going to hurt. The Josh Taylors of the world, the Tyson Furies, the guys that are true talents, that are world-class, that can be in big championship fights, that have that ability, they're going to always have a promoter, a manager that wants to work with them. It's the guys that were of the more marginal talent, who aren't going to maybe be able to be picked up as quickly. They're the ones that are going to probably suffer. And we'll see what happens. They got a lot of fighters that are going to suddenly be looking for representation.